Okay, so I'm here with Mr. Brant, a history teacher at St. Andrews, and I wanted to talk to him about oral history since that very much is a big component of my project. So, every single year you basically oversee an oral history project. What is that like?
So it's just having finished it with the current junior class. It's pretty labor intensive. I mean, especially for the students. I think I counted like 35 different pieces of it in terms of everything from the pre-interview worksheet to the final oral history project. It's a 3-month process. It largely dominates the second trimester. But the reason I think we've been doing it for literally, I think this is the 25th year of the project, is that oral history is just a different way of exploring history versus reading it in a textbook or one researching in a library or an archive. Although those are things that certainly with the oral history project one has to do in terms of the context paper, getting the context for the subject matter, the ability to ask good questions of the person being interviewed. But I think it's just a great way for certainly students to capture the human element, the emotional element of history. And as you know, there are limitations to that, but by the same token, I think it's great to force students out of their comfort zone, especially talking to somebody that they don't know, and really trying to balance, well, what does one read about this particular topic? Like in the case of you interviewing Mrs. Marcello, what was it like growing up as a young woman during World War II? Well, the history books say one thing, the research says one thing, but here I am talking to somebody who lived it. What's their perspective on the past? And again, there's a lot of truth in what Mrs. Marcello said that you can't find in written text. And again, Mrs. Marcello, for example, is an elderly woman. She may not be remembering everything crystal clear, but there's a real value in hearing her story. When we would read Studs Terkel, Studs Terkel, like I think about this YouTube channel that you're thinking about. That's what made Studs Terkel so great, is he wanted to hear stories from everybody, not the generals, not the presidents, not this male-dominated society. So I think it's the 25th year of the project. There's been over 1,500 oral histories produced by students. I was talking to a father yesterday, and he was just like, what you guys are doing is something that I really didn't have to do until college, if not graduate school. So there's the research element, there's the writing, the critical thinking element, but then there's also just the value of oral history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think oral history sheds a new light on typical history that you find in textbooks?
How does it? Again, I think it's the human element, the emotional element. You can talk about World War II and women in the workforce. This percentage, 30% of the women were in the workforce or what have you. But it's also something to say, well, what was the day-to-day grind of working on an assembly line like? Who were your friends? What did you take from that experience? It's one person's perspective. And I do think that, in the case of these interviews, you're only asked to interview one person. You could go even more broadly, go beyond Mrs. Marcello, interview 10 other women of that era, and then you probably develop an even greater, understanding of those human elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you suggest that people look more into oral history?
Yeah, I mean, I have, this was years ago, this was even before I was involved in the oral history project. I had an old tape recorder, and I interviewed both my parents. My mother's been dead for, I think, like 16 years now, but yeah, I just wanted to get a sense of, like, what was it like for them growing up, and my dad in Chicago and my mom in Wisconsin. So, yeah, we're in this era of genealogical research, Ancestry.com, things like that. And yeah, I think it's cool to know your past.
Yeah.
Or if you're into something you're really into, you can learn a lot from other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think it's great. I feel very fortunate to have been a part of this, World History Project for, gosh, it's probably going on. I mean, it's at least 20 years now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great. It's one of the things that I think sets St. Andrews apart. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Hey, thank you, and good luck with your YouTube channel. Are you thinking about like interviewing on a variety of topics, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Anthony.